Good morning, everyone. Once again, good morning to Prof. Daniel, to all our to all our participants. Good morning. My name is Kosietu. I'll be your moderator for today's session. I would like to welcome each and every one of you and thanking you for taking your time to partake in this workshop for today. It's now 9:05. I'll start by just some rules of this workshop. Please note that this workshop is being recorded and all the resources, which includes a recording as well as a presentation slide, will be shared to your respective Moodle communities. Please note that the evaluation form will be shared with you. Please do fill that form. It helps us to plan more workshop and also to evaluate of the quality of service we are providing to you, if the workshop we are providing are relevant to the student, and also for reporting purposes, and also to give to our facilitators. Before I proceed, just allow me to introduce our facilitator for today, Prof. Daniel. Prof. Daniel is an associate professor in the Department of Mechanical Engineering Science, Faculty of Engineering and Built Environment at the University of Johannesburg. Prof is a registered professional mechanical engineer with Mechanical Council of South Africa. He has been actively involved in ECSA processes since 2016, covering accreditations, registration of professionals, and certification of academies. Prof is a member of the ECSA Registrations Committee and the Identification of Engineering Work National Task Team. Prof has 33 years of industrial and tertiary academic experience. He has published more than 75 peer-reviewed journal peers and book chapters and more than 155 peer-reviewed conferences. He is currently host 2 postdoctoral fellows, graduated 7 PhD students, 34 masters by research students, and supervised 20 international interns mechanical engineering. Without any further waste of time, Prof, you may proceed.
Right, thanks, Nkosi. Good morning, everyone. If you allow me, I'll just share my screen. All right, Nkosi, I trust you can see my screen.
Yes, Prof, I can see your screen.
All right, thank you, Nkosi, for the introduction. And I'll just show my face briefly so that you just have an idea of who we are talking to. Right, so that is me there. I'll switch off my video. That I think that will help us to manage the bandwidth well. So as indicated, my name is Daniel Majigira. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Mechanical Engineering Science. I'm a registered professional mechanical engineer with the Engineering Council of South Africa, as indicated. And it is important to highlight that because I believe I'm talking to people in the engineering space. Starting next year in South Africa, next year in March or April, it will be mandatory for anyone who is practicing engineering to be registered with the Engineering Council of South Africa. So it is important to highlight that. Right, so today we are going through this workshop. I think it's planned for 2 hours. I'll try to do a presentation for about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. And then just to highlight the key issues, and then after that we can open for questions and discussions. I like it because we've got a few people on the platform, so we can have very extensive and deep discussions around what we are going to be presenting today. And if you are starting a journey on an advanced degree, writing a research proposal is one of the first steps that you need to undertake. And at times we fall into this space where we don't know whether where to start, how to begin writing this proposal, whether the proposal that we have written is good enough, and so on. So this workshop, I believe, is going to help you to navigate those challenges and hopefully be able to just sit down and start developing your proposal and writing it. So in terms of our discussion today, I mean, this is a very important, I like this quote, if you believe that you can, then you're halfway through to doing what you need to do. So it's all about the attitude. And this is more relevant, especially when it comes to writing, because there's what we refer to as writer's block. You are sitting down, you have got all the information, but you don't know where to start. How do you start that writing? Call it writer's block. And you need to be able to break through that block. And how do you do that? By just starting writing something in the space. I'm sure even right now as we speak, you all have an idea of what you need to write about or to research in and so on and so forth. All you need to do is just to start writing. So if you believe you can, and because many people have done it, you're almost halfway through there. You just need to start to walk the journey. So this workshop is structured in this way. I'm going to be talking briefly about postgraduate research. If you are embarking on postgraduate research, it's important to understand what this is all about. And the key element of postgraduate research is what we refer to as critical analysis. Some people call it critical thinking. It's part of the process. Then we look at what a research proposal is, typical research proposal structure. And then we look at how you develop a research proposal. And central to any research proposal, you cannot write a research proposal if you have not done at least a bit of some literature review. For master's proposals, my guideline is generally for students to identify at least 20 topical journal papers, not websites, journal papers that have been published in your area. You look at that, you read the abstract, you read the conclusions. If it's relevant, you then summarize it in your own words. And as you summarize these things, you start to get a grasp of what is happening in your field. And those papers that you identify should be really topical in your field. They should be setting the scene. If you're looking at this, it should be maybe within the last 5 to 10 years. You get an idea of what is happening in your field in the most recent past, because that will shape the work that you're going to do going forward. And then you need to sit down and then start to write the research proposal. Okay, and then we'll close with maybe some discussion and some questions. So that's the plan today. So maybe just to indicate that the previous workshop that we did, we were focusing a lot on the literature review. I'm going to just touch a little bit on that, but if you really want to go into a bit of some depth on that, you can go and look at those recordings from that session. Now, if you are embarking on a graduate on graduate research, some people call it postgraduate research. The idea really, stems from the fact that you have got an undergraduate degree that becomes sort of like a license for you to get into this postgraduate work. So these postgraduate studies are a bit more advanced studies that go beyond your typical undergraduate degree. So the qualification for you to enter into postgraduate will of course be a good, typically NQF level 8 qualification. So at times we refer to this as a higher degree research, the activities that you undertake, which allows you to develop and deepen your knowledge and experience within a particular field of study. So this is typically done by undertaking a major research project, but it's not always a major research project. There is certain higher degrees, especially masters, where you've got part of it by coursework and part of it by what you call a minor dissertation. Either way, you still need to do some major research activity. And this work that you do is typically supervised by an experienced academic who knows the ropes and who has gone through the process. So a postgraduate student should then is expected then to demonstrate critical analytical skills, ability to gather and synthesize data and literature from a wide range of sources. The key here is critical analysis. Your critical analytical skills. You are now going beyond the usual consumption of information, and you want to start to develop the ability to create knowledge. As a matter of fact, for a PhD thesis, you are expected to contribute to knowledge. So when you are developing your proposal, you are looking at those gaps in literature that your work is going to fill. So you're going, as part of the your research, you're going to go through quite a lot of other people's sources and so on. And as you go through them, you start to see that not everything that is out there is useful. Some of it might even have errors and so on and so forth. So you don't want just to consume something. You want to critically look at what is being published and synthesize, where the gaps are, look at where the gaps and the challenges are, and then you craft, if I can use that term, craft your own path in the space and be able to develop your own contributions. So you cannot do, in my view, a proposal, a research proposal, without going through detailed literature study. So this is, literature review is part and parcel of any proposal that you're going to develop. So this idea of critical analysis underpins everything that we are going to be talking about. We are assuming that you are developing this ability to deeply examine and interpret, let's say, a text. If you have a paper that you're looking at, you need to be able to deeply examine it and interpret what is being presented, for you to partly gain deeper understanding, but also look at its context and implications. Are there certain parts of the work that you're looking at that are not properly covered, gaps that have not been properly fulfilled? That by going through that kind of analysis, you are now starting to identify what your contribution is going to be in any particular piece of work that you're going to do. It requires you as the researcher to thoughtfully examine all the underlying assumptions. There are certain arguments that are made, there's evidence that is provided, so that you can evaluate its validity and significance, what its contribution is, and how valid it is. There are certain analyses that are done on maybe experimental procedures that are not that thorough, prone to mistakes and so on and so forth. That challenges the validity of the publication that has been made. So in this case, it is a very deliberate effort that you need to start to take, and it will form a central part of your postgraduate research work. So in this case, as I've indicated, you start to move away from being a mere consumer of information, and you need to be starting to develop your own point of view. But it's not an arbitrary point of view. It's a view that is based on data that is published, on engineering analysis. For example, in our case of engineers, we look at the engineering analysis and see the issue that is under study. And we create our own point of view in terms of what is being published. And as we walk the research journey, start to reinforce that point of view with evidence, the data that you're going to collect, the analysis that you're going to do, and so on and so forth. So developing critical analysis skill is central to any postgraduate study, any advanced research that you're going to do. You need to develop that ability to critique any work that is presented before you. So having said that, what is a research proposal? And this is our key discussion today. A research proposal is a very well structured and formal document that explains what you plan to research. what you're planning to research then becomes your research topic. You want to also be able to articulate why it's worth researching. It talks to the justification of the research and how you plan to investigate it. When you're looking at the methodology, there are certain things that you need to look at. For example, the resources that you have available, the tools, the support, and so on and so forth. So that's sort of like a working definition of what a research proposal is. But of course, if you look a bit deeper, some people have different definitions of what a research proposal is. But I think for our purpose today, that should suffice. And the purpose of this research proposal is for you to convince someone, to convince, let's say, your research supervisor, to convince a research committee, to convince maybe even the university, to convince a funder that your research is suitable, given the requirements of the degree program or the funding, whatever it is. It's suitable to be undertaken and that it's manageable. You can do it within the given time and resource constraints that you may face within that particular research activity. So that's really the purpose, to convince someone. So your supervisor must be convinced that this piece of work is worth it. If it's a PhD, that this piece of work that is being proposed to be done is going to contribute to knowledge. If it's a master's dissertation, it is convincing your supervisor that this piece of work that you're planning to do is sufficient for you to be able to develop or to master the scientific investigation technique based on the planned work that you're going to do. So I'm going to be looking at this. So in summary, what we are looking at is that the aim of a research proposal is multifold. It articulates the research problem. It establishes, in some cases, a theoretical framework. It outlines the research methodology. It highlights the significance of the study and the research timeline. How long is it going to take for you to do this work? So I'm touching on a few things here. But the next thing that we're going to look at, we want to break this down a little bit in more detail so that you can see what constitutes a research proposal and you can go about and confidently start to develop your own proposal. So because it's a structured document, I think this has evolved over time. We have sort of like settled within a certain structure. It's not mandatory to follow this structure, but it's sort of like a generic guide in terms of what a research proposal would cover. So what you're seeing here is typically what would be contained in a particular proposal. You typically have a research title. We're going to be talking about that briefly. Of course, because largely academic, you need to have a plagiarism declaration, and you also need to have an abstract and a table of contents. You could have, things like acknowledgements, list of figures, list of appendices, list of symbols, and so on and so forth added in there. But this is just a generic guide to what a proposal should look like. And on the main body, the stuff that is in blue here, you start off by giving an introduction, which is sort of like a background to your topic. What are the issues that are arising within the study field that you are embarking on? And then that will lead to a highlight of the challenges that are being faced within that particular space. So that are being faced right now, not 50 years ago, which means you need to have had a very good browse of literature and you understand what are the key issues being dealt with today. That will lead you to a problem definition. So you can separate these things if you want to, but I'm just putting them all under problem definition to say you need to have a clear problem statement. What is the problem being addressed? Secondly, that will lead you to what I call research questions. Given the problem that you are trying to address, there are certain questions which need to be answered within that particular problem. You highlight those questions. Typically, 3 to 5 questions are sufficient. Then, based on that, you crystallize a research aim, which is sort of like an indication of how you're going to to address this problem and the research questions. And then you come up with the research objectives. Research objectives, in summary, are those things that you need to be able to do. If you do them, you have satisfied the aim. If you have satisfied the aim, it means you have answered the problem statement and research questions. So there's a pyramid structure or relationship to these things. And then you define your scope. Scope is saying, I'm not going to be doing everything, but there are certain things that I'm going to do. So you're setting the boundaries and the envelope around which your research work is going to be contained. So I'm going to limit myself to a certain region of the country. I'm going to be focusing on these professionals. I'll use this methodology to collect data and so on. So you put an envelope around what you're going to do. And it's also important to highlight in there what you're not going to do. What is it that you're not going to do? And research hypothesis is basically saying, what are you expecting out of this particular work? Okay. Obviously, in most cases, we want to write this in flowery language. Given this work, we expect this and this and this to be done. But don't forget also that it's possible that nothing might come out of it, okay, because it's research. Right, so that's the problem definition part of it. And I typically then would require people to give a brief literature review. And that literature review is basically saying what I'm proposing here is hinged or is based on literature, current literature study. It's not my own views. It's not a pie in the sky. It's something that is based on what other people are looking at, what the challenges are in the field, and so on and so forth. Then you give a research methodology, which is really at this stage a high level description of the scientific approach that you're going to use to investigate the problem. In the social sciences, it can be quite extensive, but here in engineering, we typically just put a high level indication of the scientific methodology that you're going to, scientific approach that you're going to use to investigate. And then you state the significance of this research. If this is done, what are going to be the benefits? And as you are going to see, we are going to look at these benefits in three ways. First of all, the contribution to industry. That's our space as engineers. We're looking at the contribution to industry, we're looking at the contribution to society, and you're looking at the contribution to the body of knowledge. What you anticipate to be the contribution of your work to the body of knowledge. You're going to do then a research plan, how the work is going to be executed, and then you give some concluding remarks. And of course, you have some references and appendices. At this stage, typically the appendix would be, let's say, a gunshot of the research plan that you are developing. Okay, we are going to be talking about these references and so on as we proceed. So that's sort of like the structure that a typical research proposal would have. Once you have done it, you then need to do similarity checks, and we're going to talk about it so that you meet the requirements for plagiarism. You know, you don't want to even do self-plagiarism yourself, so you take it for similarity checks and make sure that you comply. So your research proposal should then be a well-written document, which is well articulated. It should be easy to read, logical. It should be well structured. You know, when you're looking at the logical development of what you're presenting, it should be very well structured. And maybe I should mention here that as you write and present, there is a string of a storyline that you're trying to tell behind the scenes. So anyone who's reading it should be able to pick that string of the story that is behind the work that you're trying to do. So there's an element of artistic storytelling that should be embedded within your well-structured proposal, and it should be something that is worth doing. So as you write this, you also want it to be very practical and make sure that it is worth doing and it is doable. You can actually do it. So those are the elements that we look at when we are looking at a good research proposal. So when it comes now to developing a proposal, I look at it in two stages rather. There's the planning stage where you sit down and you plan what you need to do for you to have this research proposal. And in most cases, it will then involve, when you start to walk the plan, it will involve gathering information and so on and so forth. And then at some point, you can sit and write. So there's the writing stage, there's the data connection. Before you put pen to paper, you want to have, done a literature review as an example. So you plan the work, you identify activities required to develop this proposal, you allocate time to it. For example, if it's identifying relevant research, you want to allocate a block of time to identifying. If you're going to do it in the library, you go to the library because then you have got support. If you can't find a particular publication, you can talk to the librarians. Maybe they will do interlibrary loan for you or whatever it is. You need to plan those activities. Okay, so what activities are required for identifying the research work? What activities are required for screening through, selecting the most relevant work? What time is required for me to read through these papers and summarize them in my own words so that I understand what is happening within this field, and generally plan the overall structure of a proposal, which is what I've just presented. And then you walk the plan. You start to walk the plan. Don't prepare a plan and forget about it. You start to walk the plan. These days, we've got these mobile phones that we can actually put our activities, schedule our activities on the phone, and then we walk the plan. When we say we're going to be in the library identifying the publications, we should be in the library at that time identifying the publications that are required. And then once everything is ready, you then sit down, you create an outline of the proposal, you start to populate the proposal, focusing on the writing, put the things on paper. Don't worry yourself about full stops and commas and whatever. Just write the document. When you write, use simple language for accuracy and understanding. The simpler, they say, keep it simple and stupid. KISS. The simpler it is, the easier for anyone to read and understand what is happening. And as you do that, use proper referencing and cite the most current sources. I'm going to talk about how you identify these sources, in the next few slides. And then once you are done, you then start the polishing. You proofread your document. Maybe you want to give it to someone to read it, to check it for you. You take it through plagiarism checks, turn it in, and so on and so forth. And then you polish it to make sure that it meets the requirements. That's the general process that you're going to follow. Now, in terms of the actual activities that you need to go through, I've got an outline here where you start by choosing the topic. What is the topic that you want to study? Some people just think about some issue that someone is talking about and they want to come up with a topic. That topic should be based on the activities that people are currently engaged in literature. So whatever topic you choose, it might be very crisp and clear. It must be written in sentence form. That's our requirements here at UJ. It must not have more than 12 words. Maximum number of words should be about 12. That's the guideline within UJ. So when you send your documents for approval, the committees that approve will check whether the title meets the requirements. Secondly, you then need to review, because you now have identified the area in which you want to research. You want to review the most current literature. You're looking at the last 5 years, maybe 10 years. Don't go 50 years to try to justify the work that you're going to do now. Okay, if it's fundamental theory, maybe it's easier to read some stuff that was done in the 60s in terms of crack propagation in metals, as an example. But that cannot sort of like drive the justification for the work that you're going to do today, because a lot has happened between now and the 60s. So you want to be looking at what people are investigating now. So that's why I'm focusing. As you develop your proposal, try to focus on the last 5 years. So I will start this year, look at publications around my topic this year, go to last year, the year before, and so on, and see if I cannot locate at least 20 papers, journal papers within that particular period. Okay, so you review, and that review is a whole activity. You want to identify the seminar papers in your field, who are the key players, what are they publishing, and so on and so forth. You identify those and separate the work. Don't try to identify and read at the same time. It's more efficient for you to be able to identify the key papers first, put them aside, and take time to screen them. Those that you have screened, you then also allocate time to read them and then summarize them in your own words. It's part of the data assimilation that you require. Based on what you have looked at in literature, you then define the problem. At times, it requires you to go and re-look at the topic and realign your topic. Here at UJ, we don't register. When you register as a master's or PhD student, we don't register the topic when you register the degree. We allow you flexibility to be able to navigate through the space. That's why a proposal is important. Navigate through the space maybe 6 months before your submission. We then register a topic because you now have crystallized, not only based on literature, but based on the work that you have actually done. You can now crystallize to say, okay, this is the topic that my work is going to cover. Okay, so once you've identified the research problem through what you have researched in literature, you can now crystallize the research questions. Typically, as I said, 3 to 5 research questions should be sufficient. Don't go 10 or 15 or something like that. Otherwise, it becomes overwhelming. Then you define your aim and objectives, okay? Based on the problem identified and the questions, you are now able to define your aim and the objectives. Like I said earlier on, the objectives are things that are actionable. If you action them, you will meet the aim. If you meet the aim, you have answered these research questions and addressed the problem. So there must be objectives must be clear and actionable. We'll look at one or two examples as we go. And then you formulate a hypothesis saying, what am I expecting out of this work? Okay. Again, I'll look at an example. If I do this work, what do I expect to get? Okay. What I have not included here is the scope of work. You need to give that boundary in terms of your work. So this literature review that you have done here is then what you need to crystallize here before your methodology. But because I have defined it here, I've let it out here. The next thing is to define your research methodology. At this stage, it's high level. You don't want to do step by step kind of description. That will reserve it for chapter 3, typically in your dissertation or in your thesis. Here, you want to just give a high-level scientific approach that you're going to use to investigate the problem. Again, as we go through this morning, I'll give you examples of that. And then you plan the work. These are activities, you allocate time, there's a budget implication to it, you present your budget as well, and then clarify the significance of your work in terms of your contribution to industry, to society, or to the body of knowledge. And as you go through this, it's a major piece of work which requires you to be focused. So you need to develop a good work ethos and remain dedicated and focused to it. Most of the challenges that we get is we prepare plans, but we don't stick to those plans. So you want to be able to create a habit of how you're going to work, and that will benefit you in the long term. So in short, this is the things that you need to do to be able to develop a proposal. I'll touch briefly on literature review. Like I said, we've got a whole workshop that we covered literature review. But I would just do these 2 slides just to connect with what we are talking about today. In short, a literature review is a summary of scholarly resources on a specific topic, and it provides an overview of current knowledge, and the keyword there is current. It has got to be current. That allows you to identify relevant theories, methods, gaps in the existing research that you can later apply to your work. And these gaps require you to be critical, to have this critical analytical mind to say, I've looked at this piece of work. Who did the work? What did they do? How did they do it? What result did they get? What is their conclusions? And when you look at that, What is your view about it? Is it something that is really good work? Are there any particular areas that will need to be added? So you're not just reading for consumption. You are reading also to be able to identify. That's how you identify the gaps. Okay, this work looked at that temperature range, but it left out this temperature range. What is the impact of if you are going to do this work outside those parameters? We are starting to crystallize the problems and what your contribution could be. So a good literature review doesn't just summarize sources, it analyzes, synthesizes, and critically evaluates to give a clear picture of the state of knowledge on the subject. So when I read a literature review, for example, I'll be able to tell whether this person is just regurgitating what is out there. A well-written literature review should have a clear pointers to say there's a gap there, there's something that needs to be contributed in that space. So the primary purpose here is to build a solid foundation and identify opportunities for new insights. So that's the purpose of this literature review. Right. So when you go through this, and when you are now, especially when you are preparing your methodology and whatever, you want to demonstrate familiarity and understanding of the topic and its scholarly context. Develop a theoretical framework and methodology for research. I'll give an example. I mean, if UJ is known very well, for example, for argument's sake, let's say machining, because I'm going to give an example on machining. There are some scholars that are really well established in machining of special alloys at UJ. And you're working on a topic related to that, and you don't come up with a single citation of the work that is being done at UJ, that raises the question: do you properly understand the work that has been done? So it must give a comprehensive assessment of or presentation of what is happening even in our own institution. So you develop a theoretical framework and methodology for your research. You position your work in relation to what others are doing, and you show how your research addresses a gap or contributes to a debate. Evaluate the current state of research and demonstrate your knowledge and scholarly debate around your topic, and to develop your own ideas around that particular topic, to say there's a need to identify or to research this and to fill the gap. And I've gone through in detail these various stages. In terms of your research, you need to search for publications, which means you need to allocate time for that. You use your library databases, internet databases like your ResearchGate Academia. You can look at books and theses that have been published as your sources. So allocate time, separate time to source for these publications. Evaluate the sources. In this case, you're looking at initially you're looking at keywords. Right? These days we use keywords. You're looking at titles, the abstract, the introduction, and conclusions. Once you're happy that it's relevant to your work, you download it, you put it aside, and so on and so forth. Later on, you want to be able to read that article, to summarize that article, and for you to be able to do that, you need to have some kind of a system that you develop for you to be able to do that. As you go through this, you start to pick up certain themes. There are general themes, there are sub-themes, there are key issues, and in the process, you identify specific research gaps, and then you outline or structure your literature review. At research proposal stage, you are really looking at a brief literature review, not something that is really detailed. There are different ways you can look at it. In terms of narrowing, in most cases, start general, but you want to really narrow it down to the nuts and bolts of the topic that you're working on. And as you do this, you can do it either on a theme basis, topical, or on a time basis, what has been developing over the years. And then you need then to write that literature review. That's the general outline. So now, when writing a research proposal, we said we start off with a topic, and that research topic must be very clear and crisp and to the point, and it should reflect the issue being researched. For our guideline here at UJ in engineering, we generally work with not more than 12 words, and written in sentence form. And you want to try to make the title a bit catchy, so that it's something that that will be informative and so on. So I've got an example here. This is some work that someone is currently involved with. Its impact of complementary machining on fatigue performance of Ti6 aluminum for vanadium and 2 life. Okay, so it's sort of like crisp, and it raises it. Brings some curiosity, right? When you start to look at it, what is complementary machining, and how does it relate to the fatigue of titanium grade 5 alloy and the 2 life? So it's already starts to set the scene in terms of what this research work is going to look at. So, and of course, when you are developing your topic, you want to be interacting with your supervisor because they've got experience in the field. They know what a good topic should look like. They know what issues should be addressed. So it's a back and forth in most cases. Even when you register your master's and PhD, that topic is not properly finalized. It will be finalized maybe 12 months or 6 months before your final submission. So at proposal stage, it remains quite fluid. It can be changed at any time as you progress, but not significant change. It should be changed within, fine-tuned within the field that you're studying. So you've gone through the literature review. I'm talking about the writing now. You've gone through the literature review, you've collected the information that you require, and so on and so forth. One of the major sections that you will look at is the introduction. Here you use the introduction to explain the context within which your study problem lies. It should be based on current literature that you have reviewed. You should also briefly describe and highlight the key issues that you'll be investigating. You don't necessarily want to say, oh, by the way, you don't write in first person. Academic writing, you write always in third person. Generally, you don't want to say, I will be investigating this. But what you do is, as you present, you are highlighting the issues so that at the end of that introduction, you highlight the need to resolve the identified issues. So I'm just extracting a sentence. I'm not saying this is the whole introduction. I'm just extracting a key sentence in the work that this guy is doing. It's a master's dissertation. He says the aerospace industry demands high quality titanium alloy components. This is sort of like an opening statement, which necessitate advanced machining techniques to meet rigorous surface integrity and fatigue life requirements. And then you build on that. So just this opening statement has got quite a lot of things that people will need to expand on, and it forms the basis of highlighting the issues that are arising from the aerospace industry in terms of the demand on titanium alloys, because the aerospace is so unique in terms of the needs for low mass components, long life components, and good structural integrity and so on. These special alloys like titanium alloy are widely used there because of their high strength, but then the problem is they are very difficult to machine, these alloys. So you are setting the scene in terms of what the problem is. So I'm just picking this as an introductory sentence that this guy is using. And typically, this introduction for a master's would typically be about a page or two. For PhD, it could be a little bit more extensive because you want to properly crystallize the issues that are arising there. Okay. Secondly, based on that, you then crystallize the problem. You need to clearly state the problem that will be addressed by the planned research. So in this particular case, this guy is saying that the primary challenge in titanium machining is achieving high surface integrity and prolonged tool life. And this is what makes these components expensive. Conventional methods such as hard turning often fall short, resulting in poor fatigue performance and rapid tool degradation. So there's a need to look at alternative techniques for machining, and complementary machining is one of the tools that can be used to address this. So the problem has been crystallized. It's clear what the issue is that needs to be investigated. Research questions, you need to craft 3 to 5 questions that your research would attempt to answer, given the problem that we have specified. the questions that this guy is raising is that the first one is, how does complementary machining affect the surface roughness and hardness of titanium components? Okay, so we're talking about surface integrity in this case. What is the impact of complementary machining on the fatigue life of titanium components? How does cutting tool geometry and coating affect the surface roughness and tool wear when implementing complementary machining? So these are the questions that are driving this research work, so to speak. Okay, so those are the research questions. You then need to indicate your aim. So it says here the aim of the work, the aim of this study aims to optimize titanium machining processes by integrating complementary machining techniques to improve surface integrity, enhance fatigue life, and reduce tool wear. So it's sort of like already the surface integrity part is talking to is talking to the fatigue life, that's surface integrity. The surface integrity of the machined component will lead to will affect the fatigue life, and then of course tool wear is then addressing question number 3. So how does complementary machining affect surface roughness and hardness? These are the parameters that will affect fatigue. Once this is established, you can then start to look at how this will affect the fatigue life of components, and how does cutting tool geometry and coating affect surface roughness. Okay, so the tool wear is then addressed by the last part of this particular aim. So your aim should be indicating what needs to be done to be able to achieve this. So I haven't put objectives here, but when you are looking at this, you then want to start to ask yourself, what do I need to do to be able to achieve this aim? For example, you need to have a very good understanding of the titanium machining process. So you need to have a detailed study of the literature. Secondly, you need to be able to design experimental processes that allow you to be able to determine whatever parameters you need to determine, to analyze them, and to conduct tests on fatigue and wear and so on, to analyze that data and to arrive at conclusions and recommendations based on the results you've obtained. So think about it in that way. I know some people want just to say, okay, design design specimens or whatever and so on, but it can be a bit more comprehensive. The more comprehensive it is, the easier it is to translate those objectives into actionable activities that you will put in your plan. Scope of work provides sort of like a definition of the envelope around which the work is going to be done, what is going to be done, what will not be done, and so on. So as an example, in this work, it says this study will be limited to complementary machining of grade 5 titanium alloy at conventional speeds not exceeding 70 meters per minute, and will not consider other machining techniques. Additionally, only boron carbide coated machining insets will be used under turning conditions. So it's giving the boundary here. What will not be done is other machining techniques. We can even go on to add, because we have indicated this, milling and shaping, whatever operations are not part of this work. Okay, so you're giving boundaries to the scope of the work that you're going to do, what you're limiting yourself to. Then hypothesis is basically a statement of what you're expecting from the research. So in this case, a good example here says complementary machining is expected to improve surface integrity and fatigue life of titanium components while reducing tool wear compared to conventional machining processes. And so this is what is expected from this research work. The brief literature review, because you've already done, you're starting, the first activity that you had done was to look at, to scan the literature. So this part of the research proposal shows that you are presenting original work and not simply reinventing the wheel. So you are presenting this literature review to identify or to show that there are gaps in literature. Those research gaps identified in literature are now brought to the fore so that it's clear what your work is going to address. So as an example here, I'm just taking one statement. Obviously, this brief literature review could be 2 pages, could be 4 pages, whatever it is. It says here, titanium's low thermal conductivity means that the heat generated during machining is not efficiently dissipated, resulting in high two temperatures and consequently accelerated wear mechanism, such as diffusion wear, adhesive wear, and oxygen wear. So it's a statement that is talking about the problems that are being identified in literature that need to be addressed in terms of two-way. Okay. Right. So this is looking at two-way. You could also, obviously, this one would have covered issues that relate to fatigue, the challenges of having good fatigue performance of grade 5 titanium alloys. So that's your brief literature review. You then go on to the research methodology. Here you provide a high-level description of the scientific method, scientific approach that will be used in your investigation. As an example, and it's just high level. You are not doing step by step to say I'll plan the experiments, I'll prepare these samples, I'll use this equipment to do this, and so on. This is basically high level. Example here says grade 5 titanium alloy samples will be tanned. These are supposed to be tanned under minimum quantity lubrication for varying complementary machining conditions. Remember, where the proposal is to work on complementary machining. Cutting speed will be kept constant at 70 meters per minute, while feed rate and depth of cut will vary, not cut will vary from 0.1 to 0.5 millimeters per minute, and 0.5 to 2.5 millimeters respectively. Okay, so that affects the depth of cut, that affects the feed rate of the machining. Prepared samples will be characterized for surface integrity and fatigue performance. A new tool will be used for each cut, and two were measured. Okay, so it's just giving a high-level scientific methodology that is going to be used to investigate the problem. Like I said, you don't need to do step by step. So you're looking at maybe not more than a page of research methodology description. Typically, half a page would be sufficient for most of the master's work. PhD it can be a little bit more extensive. While I'm talking about this, there are certain projects which require, for example, ethical clearance, where you're going to be collecting data from people and so on and so forth. The research methodology in that case will be more extensive. You want to be able to identify the approach, the research tool that you're going to be using, the sample population, who are you targeting, how are you going to select the target population, and so on, and the data that you're going to collect, how are you going to protect it or to keep it under safe conditions? Is it password protected, whatever? And the reason is there is POPI Act now, which means in that presentation, you need to be clear that you're not going to be collecting data that can identify specific individuals, because it's now is becoming an ethical issue. But the majority of the work, research work that we do in engineering does not really require ethical clearance. If you're doing machining on a piece of metal, there's no need for ethical clearance there. So there's no, most of the work is quantitative. There's no qualitative assessment of people's views and so on and so forth. So in that case, you don't need ethical clearance. But if you need ethical clearance, then you need to go a little bit in some depth in terms of your data collection tools, your sample population, how you're going to be sampling, what tool you're going to be using for data collection, how is it going to be distributed? When you collect it, how do you keep that safe? And so on and so forth. So it can be a little bit more extensive than this, but in engineering generally, this should suffice. In terms of significance of work, like I said, you need to focus on application, society, and the contribution to the body of knowledge, especially for PhDs. You cannot have a PhD, you cannot do a PhD without contributing to the body of knowledge. So that should be very clear. So this is a master's example that I'm using, says this research is anticipated to lead to significant improvement in the fatigue performance grade 5 titanium alloy components used in demanding aerospace and other applications. Improved performance will impact the aviation industry, especially in terms of fuel consumption and cost of operation. Furthermore, the work will contribute to improved understanding. This is a contribution to knowledge of the effect of complementary machining on component and machining tool performance. Okay, So it is just a sample of how one could write significance of the research. And then you plan the work, and I've just extracted this. This is coming obviously once you have got specific objectives, you need to crystallize them into actionable activities that you can allocate a time, a duration to, and you can then allocate a start time and finish time. Okay. I generally would avoid having something like this where I said it shall review, 26 days. I want to break this down for my phone to say on this day, go to the library and identify the publications, or going into the library databases to identify, to search and identify relevant topics, papers, and put them aside. And next, scan through them and screen and select the most relevant. Lastly, read, sit down, read, and summarize the publications and write the literature review. But a Gantt chart is a good way of doing this. Don't just prepare a Gantt chart and not use it. Once you have prepared a plan, you must then work that particular plan. Day to day, as you go through your research activities, work the plan. Because you have developed it, it's a tool that you need to use to guide your progress, so that whatever target date you want to be able to deliver, make sure that if it's 2025 quarter one is indicated here, make sure that by the time that you get to 2025 quarter one, you have finished the work that you need to do. Okay. And once you have written your proposal, as part of writing your proposal, you are going to be citing sources. You would have identified key papers in your study field, over the past 5 to 10 years. In general, my guideline is get at least 20 journal papers in your field as a start. If it's a PhD, you're looking at maybe something around 30, initially, so that you've got a very good understanding of what is happening in your space. Okay. And then you do your citation. I always encourage people to avoid websites. You use websites for your own understanding, but for an academic publication, for an academic communication, try to avoid using websites, especially those that are not reviewed. Like, for example, I wouldn't expect anybody to be citing Wikipedia in your academic work, but there are certain website sources. For example, ESCOM, if you want to understand the power consumption within ESCOMs and so on, you could use it. But initially, I generally discourage that. Base your literature review on published journal papers which have been properly peer reviewed, and you can have the confidence that the information that you are citing has been looked at by other professionals as well, and so on. So in engineering, generally we use IEEE. I know some people are more comfortable with Harvard, but generally we use IEEE referencing star, an example of which I'm putting here. So for this work, you can see here, this guy is looking at something in 2020, 2021. We are talking about very recent, publications. That's why it's important to always start. If you're starting your proposal today, start by looking at what has been published this year, and then last year, and so on. Initially, just focus yourself on the past 5 years. You start to get a sense, because even within these publications, you start to see they are obviously citing sources that have happened prior. So your work is not only focusing on now, you can also start to get what has happened prior to the publication that you're looking at, because they are citing previous work as well. So that is really key. Collins, you can go ahead.
Good morning, Prof. I just wanted to find out which referencing style are we supposed to use? Is it Harvard referencing?
We generally use IEEE in engineering, IEEE. That's one way we use these numbers. So okay, that's the engineering. We generally use IEEE, unless you've got a reason why you want to use Harvard and other ones. But in general, we use IEEE.
Thanks for that clarification, Prof.
Okay. Right. So we have covered your references. The next thing, once you have prepared your first draft, you need to start polishing it. Don't just draft something and send it to your supervisor. in some ways, it's actually very rude because you're expecting him to do the corrections for you. So sit down, polish your document, look at your structure, look at the logic of the presentation, look at the grammar. There's nothing that to irritate an examiner that more than trying to correct someone's spelling mistakes. Check your spellings and make sure that the document is good. We already have a lot of tools for checking grammar and so on. So please don't submit something that has not been checked for mistakes, because your word your word processing software has got those tools already embedded. So why would you send something with the spelling mistakes if you have got these tools already with you? If you cannot do it, because the challenge in most cases is, especially if you write something late, you want to submit on Friday, you are starting to write it today, right? If you're writing it late, it means that you won't have time to properly polish, and that's where the problem usually lies. If you write it today, you want to revise it tomorrow, or you want to revise it soon after writing so that you can submit it. In your head, the mistakes that are there will remain there. You won't see them in your document. So it's always best to write something, leave it a day or two, and then you come back with a fresh mind to revise it. Alternatively, give to someone, generally not your friends. Your friends might be shy to tell you that what you're presenting is rubbish. So give it to someone who has got a fresh mind, who is independent. I also do the same thing when I prepare something. I always give it to someone to read. I've got some report that I prepared yesterday, and I sent it out to 3 different people that are not my friends. They are not my friends. I know them, but we don't work closely together. We don't call each other friends. So I send it to them. They have a look at it, and so on and so forth, and then they'll send back maybe today or tomorrow with their comments and whatever. Then I'll polish it before I submit. Okay. The same applies if you're going to be writing a paper for a conference, for a journal, even your proposal that you're submitting to your supervisor. Get someone to look at it with a fresh eye and make a contribution to it. Once you are done with those corrections, you need to take it through similarity checks. Put it through Turnitin, and you've got a sample report here. And the question that we always get is, oh, okay, what will be acceptable? Generally, what is acceptable is 0, because we don't want you to be copying anybody, right? But if you are sitting maybe below 10%, because you can see some of these things, if you go into detail, you look at things that are like it's a title of a paper that is coming from somewhere and so on. If you can screen those kind of things in your submission for Turnitin, make sure that you do that so that you don't pick erroneous errors. But if you start to see something like 7%, 2%, 1% even, that should raise issues. Go and dig in and see what is happening here. So this is generally not acceptable as a similarity index. So I'm giving you an example of what is not acceptable, so that you can already see here 14% is internet sources, 12% is publications, 10% is student papers. So you now need to go in and check, where is this 7% coming from? And it will be summarized in the report, and look if you can change that to reduce it. Preferably, you want all these things below 1%. Okay, so things like this, examiners will quickly pick it and say you're plagiarizing or something like that. So try to keep this as low as possible. Okay, keep it very low. Okay. So that's more or less it. So in closing, I'm not going to say much, just to say that your research proposal should be well structured. As I indicated, it's a formal document that explains what you plan to research. So you must have a very good topic that is crystallized, that properly communicates the intent of the research. And if someone reads through your proposal, they will be able to see why it's worth researching. So the justification is embedded there. You don't need to convince me by saying, this is very important work, it's very important to be researched and so on. The way you present what you are finding is from literature will tell me that there's a problem here that needs to be researched. Okay. You can be explicit about it, but behind the scenes, that storyline that I was talking about will tell the story. Okay. How you plan it and how you plan to investigate the work, the scientific approach must be very clear. Of course, we can talk about time, significance, and so on and so forth. But this is sort of like a crystallization of what a research proposal is. I'll stop here and invite questions and comments. And thank you for your attention and being here during this this presentation. Okay, I'll take questions and comments.
Thank you so much, Prof, for such a detailed and informative presentation. To our participants, if you do have a question, please just unmute your mic or do type in the chat box, and then Prof will take your questions. Just a quick one, Prof. Actually, I have two questions. Firstly, how long does it take after submission your proposal to get your feedback? Two, what are the chances of your proposal being rejected, and what usually contribute to that?
Right. It's I'm assuming you're referring to submit to your supervisor and getting feedback. It depends on how busy your supervisor is, but typically within a week or two, you should be able to get feedback. And yes, it's possible to have a proposal rejected. In most cases, it requires you to change certain things. For example, if you are doing a PhD and there is already established work that has been done within that space, and you are trying to do a proposal on work that has been done, that will be rejected because it's work that has already been done. That's why it's important to have a good, thorough understanding of your topic, what is happening, in your field today, so that you can propose something that is clearly adding to knowledge for a PhD. For a master's, it's less stringent because a master's dissertation is just meant to develop someone who has mastered the scientific investigation technique. So if it's rejected, it's usually for you to polish something or to adjust something. For masters, it's very rare. For PhD, it's possible because there's a more thorough requirement for you to contribute to knowledge. I see Bandile here saying, how many pages should a PhD proposal have? For PhDs, maybe around between 20 and 30 pages. For a master's, I would expect something around 20 pages, in general. So 30 pages or so would be good for a PhD. I hope that answers that question, Bandile.
No, thanks. It does, Prof.
Anyone who have a question? Thank you, Prof, for answering me. Now I have a good understanding. Anyone who have a question from the chat, just raise your hand if you do have any question.
Yeah, maybe I'll ask a question as well from those that are there. How many of you are busy preparing a proposal? We are very few. It's only about 4 people, right? Anyone who is busy developing a proposal right now?
I'm busy developing my own proposal.
Yeah, when did you start, Collins?
No, I just started. I'm just waiting. I already got a title and research objectives and research questions. I sent it to my supervisor. I'm just waiting for him to give me go ahead with regards to the title, and then I take it off from there.
Yeah, okay, that's good. How much literature have you done up to now?
To be honest with you, I haven't done any literature. Reason because I need me and my supervisor to be on the same page, because he had already told me what he wanted to do, and I came up with certain additions. He said he wanted me to look at a particular area, but I chose a particular industry, And I don't know if that's the industry he wants me to look at. So I'm just waiting for him to tell me, because I don't want a situation whereby I've gone in depth into the industry, then he changes that, then I have to start from scratch. So once I get that information from him, then I can now gather the literature.
Oh, okay. But why are you actually doing this? Because you roughly know the space. You can already start to look at some publications, and so on, so that you start to build your knowledge in that area as well.
Noted, Prof. And thank you.
Right. I see someone who hasn't spoken here. Olalekan.
Good morning, Prof.
Yeah, how are you doing?
I'm fine, sir.
Yeah.
Actually, submitted my title, the title of my proposed work to my supervisor. My supervisor is Professor Nambi Nwulu.
Yeah.
And after he agreed with the title, I also started putting my proposal and I defended my presentation with him. And he asked me to work on the proposal. And I also told him the methodology and the system architecture. So I've submitted the proposal to him, waiting for his response on the proposal. But the last discussion we had, he told me that I should start working on the literature review, it's a systematic literature review on the topic, which I've actually downloaded close to like 60 journals using some keywords related to the topic. So I'm reviewing some of those journals presently. But
Okay. How many did you do to download?
I've downloaded like 60 journals presently, but from the Scopus
16,
index,
you mean 116?
so 60, 60.
60.
I've downloaded,
yeah, 60.
60. The Scopus index, from the Scopus index database, I was able to receive like 320 journals, which I'm actually streamlining them such a way that we're able to get the one that is more closer to the topic. And I'll start working on the systematic literature review.
Great. I think way on your way to coming up with a good proposal with 60 journals. That's and from Scopus Index, that's quite a lot. Okay. And Kosi, I think I don't know. I don't see anyone with a question. I was going to talk to Bongin Kosi, but I see they're on hold there. But I think if there are no questions, we can call it a day.
Thank you so much, Prof, and thank you to all our participants for joining today's session. If you do not have any question for Prof, we are about to end the session. Please note that the recording as well as the resources, which is a presentation, will be shared to your Moodle communities latest 2 days after this. But also, please note that I have shared an evaluation form with you. Please do complete it on your spare time. It will take less than 5 minutes to complete. It helps us to prep more of these kind of workshops, as to evaluate the quality of the workshop we are providing. Also, for reporting purposes, please do fill that in your spare time. Thank you so much, Prof, for taking your time to facilitate today's session, and to all our participants for joining today. Thank you so much. I think we can call it a day. Have a lovely day further. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nkosi, for hosting us. Thanks, everyone, for attending. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well.